Good morning. Well, I'm here. I was gone last week. So admittedly, a moment of some transparency. I actually wasn't planning on being here this Sunday originally. As many of you know, plans change and things happen that are unexpected and sometimes expected, but turn unexpected. I was supposed to be at an Army training this week to deal with like mental resiliency, kind of teaching how to, not necessarily expect the worst, kind of how to deal with pessimistic, tendencies and ideas and stuff like that, and kind of help people be a little bit more encouraged and learn how to kind of encourage themselves. That was the training I was supposed to be at, and that was a very big back and forth situation, which I'll be honest, it was kind of like a roller coaster of various feelings and emotions that I was going through. I was told that, I'd be able to go, and I was like, awesome, I can go and get this training, and it's going to be nice, I'll be able to help people, with kind of some mental toughness kind of stuff, and, I was like, that's going to be great, I'll be able to help people. So I was told I could go. Then I was told, hey, there's problems getting you into the class, and I was like, oh, darn, well, if I can't get in, that's okay. And they were like, we got you in. And I was like, awesome. So I got an email saying that, my application to the class had been selected. Then I got an email saying that it had been rejected. Then I got an email saying that another one had been submitted. Then I got an email saying that that one had been accepted. And I was like, yes, I get to go. Then I got an email saying that the entire class was canceled. And I was like, awesome. Okay. But that's just kind of the way life goes sometimes, right? Like, we all have expectations. Have you ever had an expectation that didn't come to be? You ever deal with that kind of disappointment that often comes when you're expecting something, and then when that thing shows up, it's not quite as good as you were maybe initially hoping for? Maybe it was significantly worse than you were hoping for. Maybe it was something that you never expected, and it showed up. This happened to me a lot with Christmas gifts because, Christmas is I should clarify. It's not all about gift giving. It's all about Jesus, but you know where I'm going with this. So during Christmas, gifts are often exchanged, and there's supposed to be this huge surprise to gifts, right? Like, you're not really supposed to know what you're being given and stuff like that, so there's supposed to be this level of excitement about the unknown and what, you're kind of hoping that you're going to get. Then you unwrap some of the things that you were hoping you weren't going to get. So when I was a kid, my mom and dad, I guess, tricked me with this gift that they gave me. I was kind of, and I know this is going to sound really like, I don't know, spoiled. Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, spoiled. This is going to make me seem really spoiled. I was trying to, figure out a way to, not be that way, but there's no way around it. So I was kind of expecting an Xbox 360. It was one of the new, hot video game consoles at the time, and that's kind of what I was expecting that Christmas. And my dad wrapped this game, or probably my mom. I'll just be honest. It was probably my mom. I don't know who wrapped it, but it was nicely wrapped. And if you're a guy, you probably aren't good at it. So, you're good at it? Nice. I wish I was like that. I'm not good at it. Never mind. So there was this game that was wrapped, and I could tell it was a game. Like, the game cases were very distinct. There was a very obvious shape to a game case. And so I was like, and it was wrapped in gold, right? Not real gold. Gold wrapping paper. And I took that to be a sign of a game that I had been wanting, right? So the game that I was wanting, it dealt with these soldiers who are ex-soldiers who go mercenary, and they're fighting for gold and treasure and stuff like that. And so I was expecting that game with the Xbox 360. And so in my head, I see this gold wrapping paper, and I'm like, man, it's got to be this game. And my dad was very crafty and clever. He handed me the game. He was like, why don't you unwrap this? And I was like, oh, it's the game. And I start like unwrapping it, and it was like not even a game I had ever heard of. And I was like, wow, you know that response that you get from your kids when you give them something that they didn't want, and they have to be like, and they're polite. They're like, wow, thanks. This is excellent. I was really looking forward to a new game. And that's kind of what was going on with this whole situation. So that's the way that my dad set it up. And then here comes the big gift that was tucked somewhere in the closet that wasn't even under the tree. And I unwrap it, and lo and behold, there is my Xbox 360 that I was really excited and expecting. But I set myself up for the disappointment with my expectations of the game, right? It was wrapped in a way that I thought it was supposed to be wrapped. And then when I got the actual gift, that's not at all what it was. Sometimes I've had disappointment because I think that I'm being lied to sometimes about my gift. So recently, within the past couple of Christmases, it was 2 years ago. I don't think this is going to be seen by them, so I'm going to talk about it. One of my aunts, my aunt is the kind of person who likes to, joke around quite a bit. She's pretty well known for saying some funny things, haha, jokes on you kind of stuff. So she came for family Christmas, and she was like, Richard, here's your gift. It's socks. And I was like, that's okay, thinking that this is like a prank. Most of the time, if you've ever seen a Christmas Story, are you guys familiar with the movie A Christmas Story? They get the socks, they're like, chuck them. For the most part, it's pretty well known. Socks are not the go-to gift. So when I was handed my gift bag and told it's socks, I was like, okay. And she was like, they're good socks. And I was like, okay, ha. And I open it. It was socks, dead serious. I opened it, and it was they were nice socks. They were Columbia, boot socks. So, I was told exactly what they were. And when I opened it, I was still disappointed. I shouldn't say disappointed. I love the socks. I wear them. But, I was I thought I was being pranked when I actually was told what this was going to be. Friends, today is Palm Sunday. I don't know if you know that. Hopefully by now you know that. The bulletin also said Palm Sunday. Today is Palm Sunday. And today we're going to be looking at the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. So we're going to be looking in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be in chapter 21 if you want to go ahead and turn there. But as the Gospel of Matthew has been unfolding, there's all of the, Jesus has obviously gone through his ministry. He's approaching the final week of his life. He goes through Jerusalem, and before all of this takes place, he's already told his disciples several times, as far as I can recall, I think it was 3 different times, he has told his disciples what is going to happen this week. He's referring to Good Friday, where Jesus is betrayed. He's turned over to the Romans, and he is, eventually killed and, put on the cross. He has told them time and time and time again that this is what's going to happen to the Son of Man. And they're just like, oh, Jesus, that's a good one. Remember the Simon Says series where we look at Peter and, Simon, and he's like, that's never going to happen. And Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan. That happens after Jesus predicted his death one of the times. And so these people, they're just not really understanding. Jesus has told them exactly what's going to happen to him. And one of the things that I find really interesting about it is that it's not just Jesus who has told them what's going to happen. It's the prophets that the Jewish people have been studying for centuries. I'm not talking like they've been studying it for, a couple of years. They just started dabbling in the Bible and in the scriptures. It's like the rabbis looked at the Old Testament scriptures and they were like, this is messianic. This does talk about who the Messiah is going to be. This does refer to our King. This is what these texts represent. That's the makeup of this whole scenario that unfolds in Matthew chapter 21. That is the history of what we see. And in Matthew chapter 21, we see what happens when Jesus enters into Jerusalem. If we can go ahead and put it up, it says this. This is Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 through 11. This is what it says. When they approached Jerusalem, they being Jesus and the disciples, and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus then sent 2 disciples, telling them, "Go into the village ahead of you. At once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them at once." This took place so that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Tell daughter Zion, see, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did just as Jesus directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt, then they laid their clothes on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their clothes on the road. Others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. Then the crowds who went ahead of him and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven." When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was in an uproar, saying, "Who is this?" The crowds were saying, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." Now, friends, there's a lot that gets unpacked here. Jesus is about to enter into Jerusalem, like they are walking through the gates, and Jesus talks to a couple of his disciples. We don't know which ones. Some people venture to guess it's probably Peter and John because, John is the beloved disciple who Jesus loves a lot, and, he makes it very clear that that's who he is in his gospel. And then Peter is, the rock and all that fun stuff. So, there are people who speculate that it's him, but we don't really know. And so they go to get this donkey, and they're basically like, "Hey, what are we supposed to tell somebody if they're like, why are you stealing those donkeys?" And Jesus gives this really cool, I'm the king kind of answer. And he's like, "Just tell them that the Lord needs them." And they're like, "Okay." And so they go to get these donkeys. And we see throughout some of the different gospels that somebody approaches them and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing with these donkeys? They're not yours." And they straight up, I kid you not, this happens in the Gospels. They look at them and they look at the owners and they say, "The Lord needs them." And they're like, "Okay." No questions asked other than, "What are you doing? Why are you taking these donkeys?" "The Lord has need of them." "Okay, no problem." Friends, they knew who Jesus was. Okay, I want to make that very, very clear. Jesus has been healing people. He has been, allowing people who couldn't walk to stand to their feet with the power of his word and have them walk for the rest of their life. As far as we know, I don't know if they broke anything later, but, we didn't get that far in the Gospels. But they were able to walk. He found people who could not see since they were born. And he, spits in this dirt and, turns it into this mud, wipes it on somebody's eyes, and they're able to see. Lazarus has just been resurrected from the dead. This dead guy named Lazarus, who people knew, like there had been professional mourners that were hired, which was very common in this time for the Jewish culture to hire these people to come and be professional wailers and mourners and stuff like that, and kind of come to show how important this person was who died. That's kind of what it was. And so there were all these people who came to like whine and cry on Lazarus' behalf. He had been placed into a tomb for 4 days. This was not like some secret cover-up where he was just like in a little bit of a coma. He wasn't like just taking a really long nap because he had worked hard. Like, this guy was dead. Jesus shows up, and there's some speculation about why Jesus takes so long. Based off of my understanding, when it comes to the death of Lazarus, when it came to the death of people in the Jewish culture at that time, there was this idea that the soul of the dead person would kind of hover over the dead body for like roughly 3 days. So as far as I know, based off of some of the things that I've studied and kind of looked at, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So this is like, he's not just like dead. He's like really dead. Like, soul is not even here anymore. It's almost like when Jesus comes up and walks to the tomb and says, Lazarus, get up and come on out. It's almost like when that happens, Jesus like yanked his soul back into his body and placed it back into Lazarus. And then he has them, move the stone, and Lazarus has his soul return to his body, and he walks out of the tomb. People knew who Jesus was. There were plots to have him executed and killed by the Sanhedrin, which is like the know-it-alls of all know-it-alls. They wanted him dead because they were worried that he was going to have so much power and authority that theirs would kind of be, done away with. People knew who Jesus was. So when they tell the owners, the Lord has need of this donkey and its colt, they know. They're like, the Lord is walking, like the Messiah, the King, is coming through. And so what happens? They take the donkeys. Jesus sits on the robes and stuff that had been placed, the garments that had been placed on the donkey. He sits on those. And as he walks through Jerusalem on the donkey, people who were wealthy enough, people who, owned their garments and stuff, they would take these garments off and they laid it on the ground so that the donkey could walk on the robes. And then there were some who went and cut palm branches and placed those palm branches on the ground so that the donkey would walk and step over the palms and, step over the garments. Friends, this is all king stuff. And I know that's not like a very pastory way of saying that. This is king stuff. This is not like, here comes some guy who, doesn't like dirt roads. Let's put our garments down on the ground so that he doesn't have to walk on a dirt road. This is stuff that was done for kings. So in 2 Kings chapter 9, in 2 Kings chapter 9, there's this guy who has been anointed to be king of Israel. His name's Jehu. So his name is Jehu, and this is 2 Kings chapter 9. What ends up happening in verse 13, they are proclaiming that he is the king, and this is what it says. Then they hurried, and each man took his garment and put it under him on the bare steps and blew the trumpet, saying, Jehu is king. They place the garments on the ground so that Jehu can walk on these garments, and as this happens, they look at him and they yell, Jehu is the king. There is no Jehu's, this cool guy, we like Jehu, he's decent. There is no like, Jehu was a good commander in the armies that one time. This isn't Jehu was just a good prophet, he's just a good teacher. That's not what happens. When Jehu walks on these garments, they look at him and they say, he is the king. So back to Matthew chapter 21, in verse 5, that's where we see this prophecy, right? And it says, tell daughter Zion, see, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Friends, that's exactly what we see in Zechariah 9. It says, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Friends, Zechariah was several hundred years before Jesus. And the people didn't get it. Isn't that kind of crazy? Isn't that kind of wild? If your whole life, and especially the rabbis and the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin and the Sadducees, like the people who are supposed to know the Old Testament and all of the scriptures of the Old Testament in and out, they're reading this stuff and they've already determined, like, yeah, the coming of Zion's king, like that is messianic. That's about, the Messiah who's going to come and he's going to be Israel's king. Like, they have that part down. And then when Jesus comes in on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey, they're like, it kind of makes sense. It's part of the reason that they place the branches. But I think that their expectation is a little off. They have been told exactly who their king was going to be. They've been told time and time and time again. The disciples, Jesus had warned them that he was going to go to Jerusalem, that his life was going to be taken, and that he was going to raise from the dead 3 days later. He had told them all of that stuff. And they didn't buy it. They didn't get it. And they didn't get it for the same reason that the Jews who yelled, crucify him, didn't get it either. As he enters into Jerusalem, they know who he is. They know he's king. They know he's Messiah. They know these things. That's why they lay the robes down. That's why they place the palm branches. That's why they use all of this, interesting language of, where is it? Hosanna, to the Son of David. That's a messianic title. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Like, these are all things that they're going to say about the Messiah. They get it, but they don't get it enough. Like, he comes in on a donkey. Now, understand that the donkey oftentimes we look at the donkey and we say, this is just to show Jesus' humility, and there's some truth to that. The humility of riding in on a donkey, it does show humility, but another aspect and another symbol that the donkey represents is not just humility, but also peace. It's a symbol of peace. Kings would often, ride in on like these war horses. During times of war, like they would ride in, they would ride out, like they had been, conquering, they'd been victorious, they're going out to battle. That was the expectation. If they came in on a donkey, it was because this is to establish a time of peace. Well, what is Jesus called in Isaiah? The Prince of Peace, right? That's one of the messianic titles that's given to the Son of David, the Son of God, the Son of Man. That he would be the Prince of Peace. And he rides in on a donkey to usher in an era of peace. But friends, that's not what they wanted. That's not the Messiah they wanted. It's the Messiah they got. But what's he going to do? He comes in, riding in on a donkey instead of a war horse. Like, doesn't this Messiah know that we've been oppressed for generations and generations? Doesn't this Messiah get the hint that the Romans hate us, that they oppress us, that they tax us like you would not believe? Doesn't this Messiah get that? Doesn't he understand? And they start to think, and it's like, wait a second. We just laid the garments down. We just laid the palm branches down. We just called him the Son of David. We just called him the one who comes in the name of the Lord. We just said Hosanna. Why are the Romans still here? Why are they still oppressing us? Why is this Messiah not doing anything about that? And friends, I think they go through the same thing that you and I go through when we have these expectations that just don't get met. They go through this disappointment. You want to know why? It's because life didn't get easier. That's what they were expecting. To them, that's what Jesus was supposed to do. That's what the Messiah was supposed to do. That's what, the Son of David, the King of Zion who's going to come, that's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to make our lives easy. Like whoever's oppressing us, they're just going to get slaughtered in mass. They're going to cease to exist. And he's going to establish this earthly kingdom where we're going to be up here and everybody else is going to be down here, because throughout our entire lifetime, we've been down here while everybody else is up here. And Jesus didn't do that. He didn't come in and conquer the Romans or the Greeks or the Babylonians or the Persians or the Egyptians or all of the different civilizations that had been oppressing and making their lives more and more difficult. He didn't overthrow any of them, and because that expectation wasn't met, 5 to 6-ish days later, they're going to be yelling, "Crucify him." Friends, what's your expectation of the Messiah? What's your expectation of the Messiah? What do you think about Jesus? And here's the follow-up question that I want you to ask yourself. What is Jesus supposed to do for you? What's your expectation that Jesus is supposed to do for you? Because, friends, this mindset that the Jews have by the time that Good Friday rolls around and he's been handed over to Pontius Pilate, that Jesus has been handed over, this mindset that the Jews have, that their expectation wasn't met, that the Romans didn't cease to exist, that their lives weren't made easier, this mindset still exists. Friends, I'll be honest, there are entire church movements and pastors who will preach to you the same thing that the rabbis and the Pharisees were preaching to the Jews. That when Jesus comes into your life, he's just going to make your life easy. It's just going to, boom, vanish. All the oppression that you go through, it's just going to disappear. All the temptation that you face, it's just going to disappear. All the hardship that you face, it's just going to disappear. Jesus is going to, come in and he's going to fix everything. And there are people who believe that. Friends, that's not Jesus. I hate to, if you were holding that little balloon and I just walked by with not even really like a needle, if I walk by with like a sledgehammer and like hit your balloon, I'm really sorry, but that's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't promise that our lives are going to be easy because we follow him. He actually tells us that it's going to be hard. Jesus says, they persecute me. Do you think you're going to be off the hook? And his disciples are like, yeah, that's a good point. Throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire, pretty much up until Emperor Constantine, roughly, Christians were persecuted. They were taken and thrown into the Colosseum and fed to the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, so that Romans, the people that Jesus was supposed to get rid of, could watch and laugh and enjoy, eat some popcorn while they're being devoured, alive. Not killed and then thrown into the Colosseum like, hey, Romans, let's all huddle into this Colosseum and watch Christians run around for their lives and scream in agony and pain as they're being eaten alive. Great, I'll bring the popcorn. Like, that was the mindset of the Romans. Nero was like, hey, I'm throwing this giant party. And they're like, hey, it's happening at 9 o'clock. How are we going to be able to see? And Nero was like, hey, don't worry. We're going to light some Christians on fire and use them as torches. These are historical facts. This is stuff that happened. Fun fact, Nero burned Rome to the ground and then was like, it wasn't me, it was the Christians. They did it. Do you think that elevated Christians in the sight of the Romans? Do you think that when they heard that their capital was burned to the ground, that all of the Roman people were like, Christians are great? No, it made things even worse. Friends, who is the Messiah to you? Who is Jesus the King to you? What does he do for you? Is he, A, here to make your life easy, to get rid of all of the hardships in your life, to make sure that you never go through temptation ever again, to make sure that, although you've got your money tied up in the stocks, your stocks are going to be the only ones that never go down. Everybody else's, as the market crashes, your stocks, they just miraculously survive. Is that your king? Or is it option B, a king who loved you so much that he came down to this earth and he went through hardships and he went through trials and he went through temptation and he went through pain and he went through suffering and he had the flesh of his back ripped off by whips. And then, when he had no more skin, they placed him onto wood. This wasn't like a comfy cross. This wasn't like a cross made out of gauze. This was a wooden cross with all of the dirt and the grime and the moss and all of the nonsense that goes on, the bacteria, with his flesh freshly peeled off and then laid onto the cross. I don't know if you've ever gotten any. So I have little hangnails and stuff, which this is probably TMI for you guys, but we're going to talk about it anyway. You probably can't see it, but I have these little red things just from skin that kind of peels. I know this is really gross, and you're probably going to when I shake your hand after church, you're going to be checking my hand to see what it looks like. Friends, when that first happens and then it gets touched by anything, including a Band-Aid and even Neosporin, it stings, right? Just a little bit of cuts and sores. You ever gotten a cut, got pricked by a thorn or something and then something touches it? It stings a little. Now imagine if all of your arm, all of the flesh of your arm was gone and then somebody, decided to stab a board to it. A 2x4. And then they just nailed it to you. That's what happened to Jesus. Not the 2x4, but you know where I'm going with that. Friends, he did that so that you could be saved. He did that so that you could have salvation, maybe not by your worldly oppressors. He did that so that you could be saved from a debt that you can't pay off. Debt is a really big thing in our country. I don't know if you guys know that. You probably do. There's people who have individual debt, and then if you look at like our country's debt or whatever, it's like trillions. Friends, imagine if that country's debt of trillions was your debt and you were given a minimum wage job and you were told you have to pay this or else. You think you're going to pull that off at, what, $12.60 something an hour or whatever it is in the state of Missouri? Fun fact, federally, if we're just handing you the government, what the United States government tells you is minimum wage, you got $7.25 an hour to pay off your $1 trillion debt. That's kind of like what the debt that Jesus took from you is. It's gone. I want to say it was my car. I got my car worked on not too long ago, and this is going to be really cliche Christian stuff that I'm going to talk about, but I'm doing it, so it's okay. Thank you. So I got my bill, and I paid for this car to be worked on, and they handed me my receipt, and on that receipt there was something that was stamped on there, and it said paid in full, which means that I don't owe anything. I don't have to make payments towards, that repair that was done. Friends, that paid in full sticker, stamp, can be placed on your life and on your soul. And it's because of what Jesus did. It's because Jesus was the king that he was, not the king that the people wanted him to be. And so, friends, our final point for the sermon today is this. Even if Jesus isn't the king you want, he's the king that you need. Even if Jesus isn't the king that you want, he's the king that you need. Friends, Jesus was not the Messiah that the Pharisees, that the rabbis, that the Jewish people wanted, but he was the one that they needed the most. They were more worried about their own personal physical persecution and affliction than they were about the affliction of their souls. Jesus has an interesting little statement that he gives. I want to say Matthew 10:28. I just put it in a paper, so hopefully I got that correct. He's talking to the people, and one of the things that he says is, and this is going to be a rough paraphrase, basically, who should you fear? Should you fear the people who can kill the body? Or should you be fearful of the one who can kill both body and soul? Friends, we are both. We are both body and soul. And so what Jesus is saying there in Matthew 10:28 is your fear, your respect, where your trust and your faith lies should probably be more so in God the Father, who holds your body and your soul in his hand, as opposed to just the Roman government, just your neighbor, just somebody who stands next to you who can at best take away your body. Even then, Jesus was trying to get them to not just think about themselves here on earth, but to think long-term, eternally about their spirit, about their soul, and get them to envision life spiritually rather than physically. And they could not get it. They could not understand. The disciples could not understand why the Messiah had to die. And it's not like Jesus told them that I'm only going to die. He told them the Son of Man must be killed, and then 3 days later he will rise. And they got so focused on the die part because they could not get it. Friends, I don't want that to be you. Even if Jesus isn't the king that you want, I promise you he's the king that you need. I'm going to conclude with a quick little metaphor, I guess. I don't know about you. I have parents. My guess is that you guys also had parents at some point. I would venture to guess that's probably correct. I could be wrong, I'm not being judgeful. Friends, did you ever, tell me if this is just me, did you ever grow up around your parents and they tell you to do something or they do something and you wish that they didn't do it, but then as time went on, you found out that they were right? They told you, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that, and then you did it anyway because you were like, what does mom know? What does dad know about being alive? They've only been doing it twice as long as I have. And then you do the thing, and then the thing ends up really hurting you. It ends up not being beneficial at all. Friends, I think God is a lot like that. Oftentimes we think that he doesn't know what he's doing, that he doesn't know what he's talking about, that he's just some old God who's, not with the times anymore. I love how I even did that little hand motion, because that's not with the times anymore. I think sometimes we view God like we view our parents, that they just don't know what they're talking about, that God just doesn't have any inkling about how we should be, living our life and about what we should be doing. Friends, he does. And the nice thing is that unlike your parents, he's always right 100% of the time. And you probably don't like to hear that. You probably don't like to hear that he's right 100% of the time and you're not. But friends, sometimes that's what you need, right? There's an entire Bible full of things that we should and shouldn't be doing as Christians. And God didn't just give that to us because he hates us and, wants us to not live a life that is fun at all. He does it to protect us. Sometimes God the King, Jesus the King, sometimes he rules in a way that we disagree with. Friends, when that happens, you're probably the one who's wrong. And by probably, I mean you are. The way that he rules, the way that he reigns, the way that he handles the universe that is at his fingertips, the way that he does that, it might not be the way you want him to. But friends, I promise that's the way you need him to. Because keep in mind, you and I, we can see that. And what God can see, my hands can't even reach. Friends, I know many of you have been hurt. I know a lot of you, you've gone through pain, you've gone through hardship, you've gone through things that are just terrible. And I think sometimes when those things happen, we look at Jesus the way that the Jews looked at Jesus, and we say, you weren't supposed to allow that to happen. You were supposed to take this away. You were supposed to fix this. You were supposed to do that. But friends, maybe his way's just better, and you just can't see it yet. And I know that that's really hard. Trust me, when I look back on my life, there's not a single moment where I look back on my life and I'm like, My life wasn't difficult at all. In fact, it's all been roses and gardens and also some manly stuff, you know? Which, ironically, I can't name right now, so that's unfortunate. I don't know any manly stuff that would be cool. Cars. Priuses. I'm just kidding. Friends, I wasn't promised that my life was going to be easy when I followed Jesus. And my life hasn't been easy, but friends, I also know that I haven't lived as long as many of you, and I haven't gone through some of the things that you guys have gone through. But friends, Jesus is faithful. He is. Jesus is faithful, and Jesus is good. And he rules well, even when we can't tell. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your Son. I thank you that you sent him to this earth. Father, I thank you that he was willing to submit to your will. God, that when he asked for the cup of his suffering to be taken, God, I pray and thank you that he was willing to do it anyway. Friends, God, I thank you for my friends here. I pray that we would be people who can accept your truth. I pray that we would be able to accept Jesus not as the king that we want, but as the king that we need. God, I pray that we would be able to trust him even when things are hard for us, even when life isn't going easy, even when things aren't falling into place as we would have them fall into place, even as the stock market goes crazy, even as we lose things that we own, even as we go through hardships, even as we lose loved ones. God, I pray that we would just rely and trust in the faithfulness and goodness of your Son. God, in a world full of so much uncertainty, your word, your Son, your faithfulness, your goodness, your love, your mercy, those are all certain and unchanging. God, we love you, and we thank you for that. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. As per usual, this will be the time of invitation. If you have any prayer requests, any praises that you would like to lift up, any decisions that you would like to make, this will be the time to do so as we have our final song.